Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Unleashing Potentials podcast. So joining me today is Dominika. Welcome.
Hello, Bernard. It is a pleasure and an honor. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So tell our listeners, where in the world are you? Which country?
I am in the US in beautiful, wonderful, cold Houston that's now only 85 degrees.
Oh, wow. That's, yeah, wow. Yeah, it's warm here today. Surprisingly, it's fall, but yeah, it's only gonna get cold. Yeah, yeah. So happy to have you on the podcast. Can you start by telling us who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So I'm a very rare breed of coaches. I'm a brain coach.
Mhm.
I work with rewiring your brain, making sure that all parts of your brain, like prefrontal cortex and basal ganglia and anterior cingulate and other parts of your brain, are optimized and working to the best of their abilities.
Mhm.
I include looking at your blood work when I work with you. So we know that you're producing neurotransmitters that are necessary for your brain to function properly. We work also with food and we work with rewiring your brain. And that is mainly for people who are suffering from anxiety, PTSD, depression, fear of failure, fear of success, fear of rejection, self doubt, self loathing, procrastination, imposter syndrome, anger management issues. Those are the main components which allows us to rewire your brain so you can default to your best behavior, because your brain optimizes your functioning and it makes 95% of your behavior an automatic behavior. So now with this knowledge, we get to choose how we want to act automatically, and we'll get to rewire so your default behavior will be the one that serves you the best and allows you to have an amazing life, which encodes basically success and happiness in your DNA.
Wow. I find it truly fascinating what you do. Let's just say I'm sort of obsessed with the brain because of my history. Wow. So give me a scenario how you would work with a client. Let's say they have anger issues. What are some strategies that you would use to help them?
Right. So, first of all, anger issues come from different elements of life. As I said, if a client allows, there's a list of blood work that Dr. Amen also suggests to be done. And we check if everything is in order. Anger is assumption of somebody supposedly is supposed to act in a certain way and they didn't meet our standards. So that's where we start with, because expectations are the straight way to disappointment. So what we do, we create a new expectation that is no expectation, and we reframe behavioral patterns into more manageable ones. So let's say you go from 0 to 100 in 5 seconds. If you go from a 0 to 100 in a minute, we will get now time to interrupt that behavior and give you tools that you can stop. So I used to be extremely, extremely miserable. And I was a very unhappy human being. That outside looked extremely successful and was extremely successful. And I would keep it, bottle everything up, which is part of, going from 0 to 100 in a short period of time. And I remember I broke at least 5 doors. I broke a few chairs. It was just, I never hit anybody because it was a human, but my anger was explosive. I would slam doors, I would kick doors, I would punch doors. And I just didn't know what to do with all those emotions because I wasn't able to name them. So one of the things we start doing is, that's a typical, it's not a brain thing, it's kind of psychology, understanding what you're feeling. Because most people say, I'm angry for everything they feel. Well, maybe you're peeved, maybe you're annoyed. And your brain, depending on the feeling, releases different types of chemicals. So you have different physical feeling depending on how you name that feeling. And that is so important. So we build the vocabulary so you can react differently and with a variety. Life is not about only being happy and only being angry, sad, and depressed. There is a plenty of ways of describing how we feel. Another thing is managing, your stress levels. Stress is a huge part of us being explosive, and learning maybe not to meditate at the beginning, but how to do breathing exercises, how to take a walk and just concentrate on walking and listening to sounds that are not in your head. And guess what? Even if you do it for 3 seconds, you are winning, because that's 3 seconds when your brainwaves can come down. There are studies that showing that your heart has also another brain, has neurons and little tiny brain in your heart that controls your brain waves, which are responsible for your reactiveness. We can control how our heart beats by our breath, which slows down the heartbeat, which then sends a signal to our brainwaves to relax. But those are strategies we learn, and very often it is based in expectations of life and putting us in the center of the universe, where the world has to meet our expectations. So changing that perspective allows people to create something we call the scotoma, which is an empty space in your brain where you go, okay, maybe I'm wrong. And that's the place where we implement new habits and behaviors. And of course, you do need to practice them. It's not like, you have a session with me and then you go, oh, I'm just a jolly person. You've worked your whole life to become who you are. Now it will take some time to stop being that person, because if you've decided, if getting angry is serving you, then great. But I beg to differ that most likely most people feel guilty after they get angry, that after they blow up. I know I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to find a different way. For me, one of them was taking myself out of the center of the world and deleting most of the expectations, allowing people to be who they are, react how they react, knowing it's not about me, but it is about whatever they're going through, and I'm just in a way kind of receiving whatever they're feeling. But that's quite advanced. That's not much of brain coaching in this one. That is pure psychology. But patterns and behaviors that are wired into your brain are. And sometimes our brain is just agitated, and sometimes we might want to calm it down with different methods, from walking to supplements.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So much to unpack.
Oh gosh, I mean, I love what I do. I love what I
Yeah.
do, and find ways, because what works for me might not work for you, and that's the beauty of it. I don't have all the answers, but guess what? You do. You just don't know how to unlock the key.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's different levels of anger. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'll tell you mine. It's public now. Mine is, I suppress it. I keep it inside, and then would be just crying. It takes me a while, but just kind of suppress it. I'm exploding, but no one can see it.
Right. And that
the scene.
chemically is hurting you a lot, because certain things that we do not express, we don't know how to manage. One of the reasons we keep it inside, it is the fear of rejection. Because what happens if I show how I feel and they will not like it and they will stop liking me? Will I be alone? Will they be angry at me? Will I hurt somebody? Very often, it is necessary to use an outside mirror. And I love the question. And what would happen if you would say how you felt?
Yeah. I think some of us sort of maybe do it through journaling. I don't.
That's I don't journal either. I don't like journaling, but a lot of my clients do, and it works for them. For me, it is actually learning how to express what I'm feeling in a way that it's about me and creates boundaries. And that is a very common problem which you're expressing. The pain, and it creates feeling of loneliness, of not belonging, fear of failure, and not being loved. And that is a whole process about your identity and your belief system, and also how you get triggered. Because one of the things we can do with the brain is to break the trigger that creates that feeling. To do that, we have to discover the pattern. And when we break that trigger, we can rewire your brain, because when you recognize the trigger, now you get to choose what you're going to do. Until you don't know where the trigger is, you just keep repeating the same pattern over and over and reinforcing whatever you learned. But when you recognize what is that one moment that it goes to anger, then you get to say, for example, a stop technique, which is a very well-known technique in the neuroencoding world. One of the techniques I use to rewire your brain. And we get to choose a different behavior. Now, it's not going to work the first time you try or the second, but the third and the fourth is going to get better and better. And one point, you will have a different path of behaving when you hear. So when I lost my son, he was 16 months old. And I remember till this day, two things: the sound of ambulance coming, the sirens from the outside, far away, not close by, far away. And the second thing was the sound of flat defibrillator that went beep. For years and years, I would hear those sounds, not close by, but far away. And that sound in a movie, I would burst out into tears. My son was a long time gone, and in heaven or in hell or wherever you believe little children go. But I would still react like this was yesterday. It was such an emotional trauma. And by disassociating that event using EMDR in this case, that event from that sound, I'm able to watch movies and have no reaction. My son still passed away. Those sounds are still there, but they do not trigger any physical reaction. And that reaction was involuntary. And that is something we do with the brain. When you have involuntary reactions, like me crying because I heard a defibrillator or an ambulance, and at the beginning it was bad because ambulances are everywhere. So imagine me driving on a freeway, hearing 7, ambulances and going into hysterical cry. I mean, that was difficult to function. So disassociating those emotions, events from the past, it's not going to bring my son back, but it's going to make my life easier. And those reactions are gone now. I can function in society without, crying like absolutely crazy person. And the truth is, grief is a very specific thing. On the other hand, children and everybody who loves us would never want us to suffer for ages. This is, I literally cannot imagine. I have like a description of my funeral, and everybody has to be dressed in white in color, and they have to sing and dance and eat good food and remember amazing things that they had with me.
Wow.
Will they be crying? Yes. But I want them to stack, and that's another thing you do with grief. I want them to stack positive memories, because the fact that I'm gone, there's a beautiful story my coach told me, because I do have a coach. I actually have two, because I believe in what I do, and why should I suffer if I don't have to? So I just hired myself a coach to go and learn things that I want to learn.
Coach.
Everybody does. I truly believe everybody does.
Yeah.
And it takes 5 seconds when you work with a coach to figure out where the issue and how to change it. And when you're doing on your own, you just keep rewinding and rewinding and rewinding, and you're just stuck in there and nothing is changing. And then you get frustrated, then you get angry, and then you blow up. So my coach told me a story of, supposedly a true story, where there was a funeral of a mother. And one daughter was, crying and hysterical and making sounds, and my life is over, I cannot live without you, and all those feelings coming out, which is part of grieving. The other daughter was in the church and was joyful, and everybody was looking at her like she was crazy. And they were like, why are you like this? Why aren't you, shaking in tears? Because that's what people expect, right? She didn't meet their expectations. And she's like, I have so many beautiful memories. I am so blessed that I had her in my life. I am so blessed. She taught me so many things. And now she will never suffer again. Now she's not in pain. Now she's in peace. She made it about her being in peace and what she gave her, instead of I lost you. So it changed. And the experience, the fact that that woman passed away hasn't changed.
Yeah.
But the experience of two people was very different to the same event, which proves how you look at things and what emotions you assign to an event will change your experience. A story to that I use is when you have two best friends sitting and watching a beautiful, beautiful sunset, and it's stunning, and you can hear the water and the wind and the colors playing on the water. And far away in the distance, there is a storm brewing. You have some lightning there. And you're both watching the beautiful sunset, but your friend is afraid of the storm. So her eyes and attention goes to the storm, and she watches it in fear. When she leaves, and a few months later, she will not remember the beautiful sunset. She'll remember the storm brewing, and she missed the beautiful moment of a sunset that she could have created the memory with. And that's, again, a choice where you put your attention on, where you focus on, and what draws your attention. That is something we can control. And that is something we can change and rewire our brain to focus on things that serve us. It doesn't mean we don't notice things. It means that we just don't give our attention to make it an emotional attachment and an emotional memory connection.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. What would you say that trauma and triggers have to do when it comes to habits?
Oh, that's trauma and triggers. So your brain is designed to conserve energy. 95% of your behaviors are habits. And if you, for example, are afraid of, so for many, many years after my son died, I would watch tiny babies breathe. I would watch them literally breathe, make sure that they're breathing, my baby or not my baby. And I would have this clench in my throat and fear in my heart, and I would get all tense. The truth is that those babies were perfectly fine, but that trauma created a habit that I needed to check, although I didn't need to check. And it wasn't my responsibility, but the fear was controlling my behavior. And if you live with unresolved trauma, that is what's happening to you without, now I know what happened to me then. But then I would say, I just care about other kids. I want them to be okay. No, it wasn't me caring. I can care in different ways about kids, not necessarily checking their breathing and freaking out their mothers.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the loss of your son. It is not easy to lose a child at all. It's very hard.
It's not. And because of that, I'm able to talk about it, because of I am on the other side. I have a beautiful, joyful life. I have new kids that are 23 right now. So they're all grown up. And let me tell you, the longer you stay in that pain, the more pain you will cause to people who are alive and deserve your presence.
Wow. That's beautifully said. It's for me, it's making the choice to stay there or to do better, to be better. I'd like to touch a little bit within the medical area, if you don't mind. You did mention the brain and the heart, how they're connected, which they are. I've experienced that. Because earlier during my psychosis, I was in psych wards and emerged, but I had to have something for my heart when I was hallucinating. I was in a cardiac unit. I was the youngest person there. I've never had any heart issues until what was happening with my brain happened.
Right.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of how to ask the question.
Let's try. I mean, remember, I'm a coach. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. But I will share what I know. And if I cannot answer your question, I will let you know.
Yeah. I would say there are still triggers, like you're saying. I have so much triggers I have to work through, and I know other people also do too. It's just a lifelong journey, but it can be cut a bit shorter, especially working with someone like you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, because I still get triggers when I'm out. Oh, anxiety, and then how my heart used to feel. When I get anxious, my heart and brain, it reminds me of flashbacks. It takes me back with PTSD. I don't know if I can connect that, if that makes sense.
I think, PTSD, I would highly recommend you would try doing EMDR if your psychiatrist allows, because
What
not
is that?
all.
EMD, or is it like
EM
whisper quiet?
no, it is a technique of disassociating, and there's enough of science and enough of studies done on it that we know it does work, and we have scans of the brain while what happens in the brain.
Hmm.
So it is disassociating events, what I told you about, like for me, the sound of an ambulance with death and going into almost a cardiac arrest and having
Yeah.
anxiety and panic attacks and everything else.
Mhm.
So it's allowing your brain to disassociate emotions from the event. So you're aware that event happened, you acknowledge that it wasn't pleasant, and it doesn't make you feel anything,
Mhm.
which allows you to decrease the level of anxiety. I use EMDR techniques, but in your case, I would definitely ask if that's not triggering for your other illness, but definitely worth asking the person who's taking care of you brain-wise if that is, something you could try, because it has phenomenal results on PTSD, on soldiers, post-war, you know, traumatic experiences, allows people to finally sleep free and relax and kind of walk around without those triggers.
Yeah, yeah. I love that you mentioned sleep because insomnia was tied to that as well. I think it's,
Absolutely.
it's all connected, the nervous system. It's all
Absolutely.
connected.
It's all your
Um,
brain.
yeah, can you tell us what are neurotransmitters?
So neurotransmitters are chemicals that you produce in your gut. So what you eat makes a big difference,
Oh,
and then are transferred with bloodstream to your brain through the blood vessels.
mhm,
And what's important for your brain is that you produce enough of neurotransmitters that then allow your brains to connect, to have the neurons connect, form new neural pathways, and function in a proper way, in a healthy way. So I'm, for example, epileptic, right? And my epilepsy, unfortunately, is untreatable. So I do have to take medication not to have grand mal seizures. But because of what I did with my brain, I was able to decrease, with, of course, supervision of a neurologist, from 2,000 units to 500 units of my medication, and still have good EEG. And, I will be taking those meds for the rest of my life, but it's a huge difference, 2,000 units and 500 units. So I'm very excited about that. And neurotransmitters go to your brain. When your brain is functioning properly, it's converted into neural pathways and for the proper functioning of your brain, so your brain can be fed in a proper way, so all the connections work properly.
mhm,
It is also important for your brain that you're well oxygenated,
mhm.
meaning that what stress does, it constricts your vessels, including those vessels in your brain. If you're not getting enough of oxygen, you don't feel as clearly. So one of the things that people are taught when they're having panic attacks is to slow down the breathing, because it slows down the heart, and then there's more oxygen coming to the brain, where you're able to calm down your brain waves. That's another thing that you can do. Another thing that is recommended for people, if your brain is not being, you're not getting enough nutrients to your brain. It's like, if you want to work on an organ,
Mhm.
you need to make sure that you have the building blocks.
Yeah.
And neurotransmitters are the building blocks of your brain, outside of amino acids and everything else that we need to do.
Mhm.
Um, so it's a crucial thing, and it comes from food. It comes from what we're eating and the quality of the food.
Mhm.
And I'm not, it's not like if you eat a hamburger once in a while, life is going to change. It's not. But overall, the better you eat, the better possibility that enough nutrients get to your brain and you function better.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Is it the synapses that fires between, I don't know the,
Synapses, those, yes.
okay. Yeah, so in my case, I was told that something wasn't firing. So I don't know. I don't know the science of it, but it still happens up to this day while I'm podcasting. I had everything formulated to ask, perfect question, and I'm listening. Then when it's my turn to talk, it's completely gone. Completely. The question, the thoughts, and it happens over and over and over and over. And I just
And
practice speaking and use pictures to visualize what I'm saying.
And that's okay. You know, maybe one of the things I could suggest for you, again, I'm not a psychiatrist, but Dr. Amen has his clinics in Canada. Maybe it would be good to get a SPEC scan, because SPEC scan will show
I've
which
never heard
parts
of
of your
that.
brain,
Specs.
SPEC scan. So SPEC scan will show which parts of your brain are not functioning properly, which are malnutrition or not firing properly. And with targeted support, those can be brought back to life in a lot of cases. And it's very possible also, and then again, I'm not your doctor, I'm not your coach either, but quite often people have traumatic brain injuries that they're not aware of. They hit their head, fell off the stairs, fell off a ladder, and that shows up later on in life. And that is also reversible with the proper treatment. So one of the things I do with my clients, I send out Dr. Amen's assessment of your brain type. I also have more in-depth ones that we do. And we see, what is your brain type? What are you prone to? Because maybe you just need some support, and like things like Neuralink, which supports building of the neurotransmitters. Maybe you need specific exercises because memory is a very specific area of your brain, and that can be exercised. There are ways you can do. One of the things is highly recommended is sweating, right? When you go to sauna for 15, 20 minutes, getting the toxins out of your body. Maybe you're eating something that is inhabiting those neurotransmitters. Now, this is, again, a lot of questions. And if you go to a psychiatrist who's also aware of holistic approach and takes all those things like nutrition and your environment into account, sometimes a lot of things can be corrected without medication or with different medication. And again, as a coach, I deal up to a certain level. And after that, I absolutely refer people out to a doctor. And when that is stabilized, they come back to me and I work with them. But there are multiple things you can explore, because your brain is really not something that is permanent. You can rewire your brain. You can help your brain to get better. There are some studies that Dr. Amen has done, and programs that he has for people with dementia at the very beginning stage, where they can stop the progression of memory loss and even reverse it with certain, food, behaviors, exercises, things that you do. It's not a week thing, it's not a month thing, but it can be done. And some people do die cognitively aware. You can reverse the age of your brain with proper exercise.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Yeah. You mentioned dementia. um, it's not only old people that have dementia, people.
Absolutely.
I swear I thought I was heading that way based on how low I was functioning at the time. And stuttering, there was a time I just didn't say a word. I just didn't talk. Nothing was making sense. And I love your approach about it. Let's talk about stress, the impact, because in the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned that stress can really trigger quite a bit.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. What did you notice during the pandemic with people? I mean, all of us were under quite a lot of stress, and probably some people still are.
Well, I would say not all of us. I absolutely did not experience any stress. I actually, because of the tools I had, I went, what is a gift in this? What can I do now that I wouldn't be able to do if this wouldn't happen?
Yeah.
I started biking every day, 2 hours a day, going to parks, exercising, reading books, catching up on different things that I would have never done, getting courses done, education. And you know what? I paid off all my debts because I had nowhere to spend the money. So
Wow.
I wouldn't want this to last, but I think for me, it was a gift. And a lot of people who are from my environment, we learned how to, life will throw curveballs at you always. It's how you approach them and what you get out of them. You cannot prevent things happening. Nobody had control over this. It just happened, right? And if you look at history, pandemics did happen before. It's not like the first time. It's not,
Yeah.
it happens. You have Ebola, you have this, you have that, you have yellow fever, there are other things that happen. We had HIV that was at one time pandemic. and people were getting sick and dying from it. Now you don't die from HIV right now. They even have medication to stop the progression or make it undetectable. Now they even have, I think, medication that allows you to cure HIV. So there are plenty of things that, we are progressing as a society. We're learning, science helps us to kind of tackle those things. But stress overall is not a bad thing. What's a bad thing is a permanent stress. See, stress is absolutely necessary. If you see a freaking big line coming at you and there stop dripping from it, if you don't get stressed, I'm worried about you. Okay, stress is healthy in that case because it puts your limbic system and your whole body in an alert state. Your primal brain goes fight or flight. You make a decision and you save your life. Stress helps. The problem is that when you consider everything in your life stressful and that stress level is constantly high, cortisol then starts to be hurtful to your body and deteriorates your body. It stops you from thinking clearly. It makes your breath shallow. It creates problems with digestion, blood circulation, heart problems. It influences absolutely everything. So cortisol overall is not a bad thing. The permanent release of cortisol, stress hormone, is a bad thing because it blocks the other parts of your brain. Your brain kind of shuts down, goes, I'm in survival mode. Survival mode is about survival. It's not about creating. It's not about finding solutions. It's survival. So getting out of that survival mode is so important for you to start releasing emotions, feelings, start to see things in a different way. So if you're a person who's experiencing constant stress, you will have problems with sleep. You will not be able to fall asleep. The question is, how many of us really do what we're supposed to do, which is turn off everything that's blue light 2 hours before you go to bed? Because blue light changes your brain waves and it prevents you from falling asleep. How many of us do meditation before we go to sleep? I very often, when I have challenging weeks, and like every human I do, have, less engaging and more engaging weeks, I have my Calm app on my phone and I absolutely use the relaxation techniques to fall asleep. If you're my age and I'm 48, you're in perimenopause, most likely, and progesterone is low, and progesterone is necessary for me to sleep. So I'm supplementing my life with progesterone, and we're going to be taking it because I want to sleep. I open windows when I need fresh air. I do the walks and meditations and breathing because we live in a certain environment. And although it would be maybe nice to detach and live in a forest with animals and hear the birds all the time, it would be nice. And then we miss the connection of humans, of information, because we are wired in a certain way. So finding your bliss, things that calm you down, is so important. And it's going to be something else for everybody. And some people, unfortunately, due to high stress levels, resort to drugs, resort to alcohol, and other ways of sexaholism, right? All of those things have the counter, and well, it's basically not helping you. What it does, it shuts down the cortisol production and allows your brain to release the happy hormones, which is dopamine. And that's also in the addiction area. And the addiction area, when you stop drinking and you said something stupid, did something stupid, you feel guilty. So you drink to forget, to feel better. And it becomes a cycle. And the same with food and the same with certain behaviors. So those are all patterns because your brain creates them to cope. So it doesn't have to think because it needs the energy for something else. So that is so important that we allow ourselves to discover how we function, because everyone has a different pattern. A lot of them are similar, but they're not the same, and they derive from different situations. Some of them we picked up along the way when we're growing up, some were passed on. There's a phenomenal study on trauma and stress on mice, where they took mice and then they created fear of cherries. So anytime a mouse would touch a cherry, it would be electrified, not electrocuted, but electrified, so it would feel uncomfortable, would hurt. So after a few times, it learned that cherries are dangerous. And when it had babies and they would put a cherry there, babies would be afraid of the cherry, although the cherry never hurt them.
Yeah.
It was passed on genetically. Now, it hasn't been done on humans, but it's safe to say that it is very possible that certain traumatic experiences are passed on, and we kind of automatically react because it's logical. That would be survival instinct. If we know that lions eat humans when they're angry and hungry,
Yeah.
some people do become friends with lions, but most people don't. Just, if I see a guy walking towards me with a knife, an Adidas outfit, I don't care if it's in America or in Poland, I am running. I'm not assuming he wants to be my best friend.
Yeah.
And that's something that is passed on generation after generation with experiences, stories, and possibly in genetics, epigenetics, that's what it's called. So expression of genes.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that's so important for you is your environment. We have something called mirror neurons, which means we adapt to the environment we see and we start acting the same as the environment is.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine the most beautiful seed you take, and then you take that seed and you plant it in Sahara Desert, and you go, you're going to grow. And the seed goes, kiss my ass. I don't have any nutrients. I have nothing to grow from.
Yeah.
So who you surround yourself with is so important for your mental well-being, your brain well-being, your body, because we do mimic people. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. We take on people's behaviors. Those are mirror neurons.
Wow. I've done that. And I caught myself doing it, when I was going to school and the people I surrounded myself with. And even a few times someone said to me, why are you talking like so-and-so? Like, I did. I didn't know that. I didn't notice I did it. I just did. Yeah. So I've done that. I believe you in that. Yeah. Let's talk about cell phones. We're talking about technology a little bit. Would you say it's best to leave all types of technologies out of the bedroom? What does
Yes, absolutely.
brainwave?
Like, there's no doubt.
Leave it all out?
So I haven't read enough studies about waves from cell phones, so I'm not going to speak on that. But what I did read enough about, and I was trained on, is the blue light that changes how your brain functions. You need the darkness, you need the calmness, you need, just to be clear, in my house, there's no TV. I don't even own a TV.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a computer, but the computer, even when I'm going to sleep and it's, my bad day and I want to watch something, then it goes out of my bedroom and it's in a separate room. It is so important to have clean environments. Your brain is used to sleeping in a bedroom. So when you're going to sleep, go to sleep. When you're going to watch, have another room you're going to watch it in. When you're preparing food, prepare food. That way, you train your brain that when you walk in your bedroom, that's time to get tired. That's not time to scroll TikToks, Instagrams, and everything else. And if that's not working, take a book. Take a book. Use a calm app that you can have on Alexa, which I do have. Play rain, because everybody sleeps beautifully in the rain. I mean, oh God, I love sleeping when there is a storm and the rain is coming down and, the air is different and ozone is in the air and I just sleep like a baby. The best sleep ever. But yes, keep every electronic out of the room. It does disturb your sleep patterns and it prevents you from falling asleep and it keeps you awake. Absolutely unnecessary. Another thing that studies have shown, it is important to sleep in 3.5 hour intervals. So however you sleep, make sure it's 3.5 hours, multiplication of that, because that's the time your brain cleans out your brain, cleans the bad memories and everything that's not needed and kind of organizes your thoughts. Good sleep is more important than anything in any type of mental health disorder, and regular sleep. It's more even important, not how long you sleep, but that it's regular at the same time.
Yeah. That's what I do. I sleep quite a bit. And sometimes people are like, why do you sleep so much? Well, first of all, I'm on enough medication that is so sedative, it can tranquilize 10 elephants. Okay. And I need it for my brain to, to control, kind of help with my mental health, I suppose. Yeah, how many hours of sleep does an adult need?
It is recommended that most adults need between 7 and 9 hours of sleep.
Mm, I do 10 to 11 and I still wake up tired most of the time. And
So
yeah, go ahead.
then try to sleep in the 3.5 hour increments, because when you go over 3.5 hours, you start a new cycle. When you break that cycle, you wake up tired.
Okay, and I also wake up in the middle of the night.
Mhm.
Sometimes automatically, I'm like, I'm tired. Why am I awake? I don't know. It's been happening for years. So I get
Mhm.
up, get some water, and then went back to sleep. And then it happens in the middle of the night. I don't know why that happens. It's weird.
Well, I cannot answer that
Yeah.
because we're doing a podcast. One of the things you can do is a sleep study. Another thing is your bedtime routine.
Hmm.
Bedtime routines play a lot of, and if you're my age, I don't know how old you are, but when you get a certain age, those hormones play tricks on you. So it is important to have it very dark in your room, and it's important to have a cool room. So
Hmm.
you can be under covers, but everything has to be cool. And make sure you go to the restroom and pee before you go to sleep. Make sure you don't drink alcohol, because that wakes you up at night. Now,
Hmm.
there will be some nights that even the best sleeper will wake up. That is absolutely normal.
Yeah.
Disturbed sleep, it can be a challenge, but those things can be managed with different, approaches. And everybody needs to test out things.
Mhm.
Sometimes too much medication does what you're doing. Sometimes it's good to get a second opinion of a different doctor. Maybe there is a different amount of medication, or maybe some things can be managed without medication, some things cannot, like for
Mm.
me,
Yeah.
epilepsy, right? There are some epilepsies that can be managed without medication, but mine cannot.
Yeah.
So I need to take them, but I was able to reduce because of my brain health. I was able to reduce,
Hmm.
but that takes a good doctor and somebody open to looking for solutions.
Hmm.
um and again, medication is important in some cases and some illnesses.
Hmm.
On the other hand, anxiety, that can be absolutely managed without medication, unless you go into, killing spree and panic attacks that you want to jump off the roof, then maybe not.
Hmm.
But when you're on medication, question is anybody teaching you strategy so you can get off those medications one day?
I'm petrified to get off mine based on the experiences I've had
Right.
when I was off them. Okay, first of all, in the hospital, they took me completely off my meds one time for a few days. I swear it felt like I was dead and alive at the same time. I was just not on planet Earth. And it was just traumatic. Let's say I have PTSD from that. So I don't like them playing with my medication. They have brought it down and they added something on top that would kind of wake me up, because one puts me to sleep and then another help me wake up. But yeah, I don't like,
See,
yeah, my doctors know not to touch my meds.
I'm not a doctor, and I'm going to
Yeah,
keep repeating that. So I'm not giving
yeah,
you any medical advice, but I
yeah.
have learned that there were some doctors that would put me on medication that didn't serve me.
Mm,
And I want to function to the best of my abilities. And I was willing to try different options, including, some periods when the new medication was given to me, and I felt horrible, horrible. But in the long run, that was a great decision.
mhm,
So there are some disorders, I wouldn't say disorders, some behavioral patterns like anxiety or depression, that if it's not a clinical depression,
mhm,
and if you're under care working with a specialist like me or Dr. Amen, psychiatrist, who is also,
mhm,
looking for ways to decrease the number of medication, one of the important things is that when you're on medication, learning new behaviors, new thinking patterns, and rewiring your brain while you're on medication. So slowly it can be decreased by small numbers and everybody can observe.
mhm,
And if you have new behaviors and new ways of thinking about things and new options and techniques, you
mhm,
are able not to fall back into what was in the past. What I find and what Dr. Amen talks about is that if you're putting somebody on medication, the goal is not to put them forever. The goal is put them till they get better and then get them off of it. But if you're not learning new skills and new ways of coping and new mechanisms and new behaviors, how in the world are you going to do that if you still have the old behaviors and just medication?
Yeah.
So again, some people it might take 10, 15 years. And some people might take 2 years, and some people maybe will never get off fully medication, but they'll be able to decrease it to a point where it's not going to be influencing their life. And every person is different, and those things should be done with a good doctor and a coach working together. And very often with Dr. Amen, that's what happens. Yes, some people have schizophrenia, some people have bipolar disorders, but some people have additional on top of that anxiety, and we can get rid of anxiety. So that's one med less. Or maybe it's something totally else. Maybe because from the brain scan, you actually see the organ and you see what's malfunctioning. How amazing is that?
Very amazing. I'm curious. I want to get that done now. So he is a neuropsychiatrist. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, and double board certified. And he's also, I believe, in Canada on the board of psychiatry, who has introduced SPECT scans to standard practice in psychiatry.
Wow, that's awesome. That's really cool. Hang on. Sorry, that's my son.
That's okay.
Yeah, I'll edit that out. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to add? We talked about so many good stuff, but go ahead.
I think it's just important for us to remember that in society, it is normal to suffer from brain disorders and mental problems, health problems. Over 56% of the population of the world will experience at one point depression or whatever else that might happen. Nothing is permanent besides the fact when we die. So take care of yourself and choose ways that will improve the quality of your life. Make sure you do your research. Make sure you get second opinions. Work with a coach, because our behaviors do create our reality. How we look at life creates our reality. And if you can get those things, other things will fall off. Because if you look at life in a way that you're looking forward and you're curious, the stress level disappears. If the stress level is lower, you have less anxiety. If you have less anxiety, you need less meds. And it doesn't mean, everything will change drastically. But what if you could improve your life to a point where you're actually feeling like you're thriving and nothing is holding you back?
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes it takes making hard decisions. An example I can give is getting rid of toxic friends and people that are not serving us, because people do stress us out. They do. And to the point that some of us get sick, but we don't know how to set boundaries to cut those people out until it's too late, until we're hospitalized, right? How can we start doing that even though it's so hard to do?
Well, that's where you get a coach, because those skills are something that you can learn. And what I'm saying is that people say people stress me out. No, people do not stress you out. People are usually stressed, and you assign that high value to them, that you allow them to stress you. Yeah. It is the moment we take responsibility for our feelings, we're able to control them. Now, don't get me wrong. This is not easy. This is not quick. But what you can do is change the perspective of how you see events. I had this guy, I parked near his car. He was still able to get out and get in. And I guess he had a bad day. He was paying for his ticket, and then he started cursing me out with all the possible names, everything that was happening. And I just looked at him. And instead of getting triggered that a man is yelling at me, I went, oh my God, he must have a very bad day. So I looked at him like, sir, I get that you have a very bad day. I am so sorry you're feeling like this. I hope it gets better later on. And I did it with a smile in a calm manner. And this guy was so shocked that he didn't receive the aggression back from me that he went, oh, whatever. And he left.
Wow.
It was a pattern interrupt of what he was expecting. See, people really don't care about us that much as we think.
Yeah.
They yell at us because they're frustrated with something that they were expecting to happen and it didn't. It's not about us, it's about their expectation. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, there are some situations that people get under our skin. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The truth is that choosing your friends wisely and growing and developing yourself, it is changing your environment. And sometimes people choose not to grow with you and stay behind. And that's okay. We can still love them
Yeah.
and put our time in places that serve us.
Mm-hmm.
So, question I would ask yourself always, is this serving me?
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, taking responsibility for what you're feeling, how you're reacting, what you're thinking is so important in growth, because people have no power over you unless you give them that power.
Ooh, I'm gonna carry that one for a while. That is so beautifully said. What an empowering, incredible episode this has been. Thank you so much for your time. Before I let you go, what is the meaning of life for you?
Happiness.
Mm-hmm. And last question, where can my listeners find you and your work and support what you do? Maybe they want to work
Absolutely.
with you.
So you can always find me on Facebook and Instagram at Your Brain Coach D. You can find me on LinkedIn, Your Brain Coach D.
Mhm.
You can find me also under my first and last name, Dominika Staniewicz. And my website is yourbraincoachd.com. And then you can also find me on YouTube, yourbraincoachd.com. Or you can email me, yourbraincoachd@gmail.com.
I love that the name is for everything. It's the same. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for everything that you do. And thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey and for sharing what you do with my audience.
Bernadette, it was an absolute pleasure. I hope everybody can pick something for themselves
Mhm.
and make their life a better place to live.
Thank you so much.